the only authorization given was that the building would be hidden by another one, so it could not stay on the main street. That's why it's a little bit behind and a little bit hidden. Anyway, the synagogue is a very important one in Lisbon. We now have a permanent community of Jews living in Portugal. There are about 3,000. Unfortunately, we had many troubles in the past. We were not very nice to them, and we expelled them, most of them in the 15th century, the ones that didn't want to convert.
They went to the Netherlands.
Exactly. So there were this diaspora and occurred, and they went all over Europe, and a few, yes, went to the Netherlands, it's true. So we have a small community right now. They live basically in Lisbon and in other cities, other towns throughout the country, like Belmonte, for example, or Tomar, or in Faro, in the southern part of the country, in the Algarve. This is where you can already see a little bit of the architecture of Lisbon. These beautiful buildings on the left, they're all from the 19th century, and they gather all the characteristics of the post-earthquake architecture. The iron balconies, the attics on top, the beautiful windows, and further on you'll be seeing also some that have their facades covered with tiles. In front of us we have the statue of the Marquis of Pombal. This is one of the most important squares of the city center. The Marquis of Pombal was our Prime Minister during the earthquake of 1755, so we owe to him the rebuilding of the city of Lisbon. So he was really the one that was the responsible for all the rebuilding works of Lisbon, for turning Lisbon into this very modern city we have nowadays, more functional, more modern, with this where we have this new city where we before had a very medieval city. So we had a very dark Lisbon with wooden houses. The windows were quite small. We didn't have these big and wide avenues. The squares as we have them nowadays didn't really exist. So it was a totally different Lisbon. We can still see a little bit of this old Lisbon through the old neighborhoods like Alfama, for example, close to the castle, close to the cathedral. But the city was completely changed after the earthquake. The earthquake reached 9 degrees on Richter scale, so it was really terrible and very strong one. We live in a very seismical city, so it's helpless to think that it was the only one. It was not. In 1969 we had another one, very strong too, and 8 degrees. But of course, that since that very violent earthquake in the 18th century, we have our buildings prepared for that. So the buildings are all have all this anti-seismical structure. This is Liberty Avenue. This is the most important avenue and the main avenue in Lisbon. It's this beautiful boulevard where you get to see these beautiful palaces and these trees that are part of the old park that we have here and that was open to the public by the end of the 19th century when we opened this avenue as today we have it. So it was just a park surrounded by fences where the population was not able to enter. Only nobles could promenade themselves here. So it started to be free. That's why Liberty Avenue is the name by the end of the 19th century. If you look at the right-hand side, you have the Spanish flag. That's the Spanish embassy. And this monument dates from 1933, and it is an homage to all the soldiers that fought during World War I. So the First World War was the only one in which we entered. We were neutral during the Second World War. We were already under the dictatorship of Salazar. Liberty Avenue is also where you can find the most expensive square meter in Lisbon, between 6,000 to 7,000 euros. So it's quite expensive to live here. And it's also where we find the most expensive stores. So you have all the important stylists represented here. They all have their shops here. And we even have people flying to Lisbon just to go shopping. So they come from different countries and they enjoy a lot coming to this wonderful avenue, and they visit all the important shops of these fashion designers. When we finish going down Liberty Avenue, we will find a square called Restauradores. Restauradores is the name of the Portuguese who were able to restore the independence of Portugal after the 60 years of Spanish domination. We had a union with, we were united to Spain for 60 years between 1580 and 1640. There was no Portuguese that could rule the country because our king had died without leaving any children. He was not married yet, and so the crown passed from King Sebastian, the Portuguese who had died, to Philip II from Spain, who was his cousin and uncle at the same time. So we were ruled by the Spanish for these 6 decades. If you look at the right-hand side, there's a funicular going up the hill. That's Gloria Funicular, and this is Restauradores Square, where in the obelisk you can find many dates and many names of the places where all these battles between Portugal and Spain occurred, so that finally we could have our country back. And that's when we started the last dynasty, the Braganza one. If you look to the right hand side, you'll be seeing a beautiful facade which recreates the manual in art in the 1800s. It's the railway station from Rocio, and we have just reached the city center. This is the most important square. It's the meeting point, it's where we find everyone, and it's where you have these beautiful French fountains and the statue of a Portuguese king from the 19th century called Peter IV. He's known in Brazil as Peter I. He's the one that gave independence to Brazil in 1822. So this was also where we had our medieval hospital since the 16th century, the All Saints Hospital, which was standing on the left side of the square. And unfortunately it disappeared on November the 1st, 1755, which was the date of the earthquake. From here you can also see the geometrical city that was completely programmed, planned with all these minimal details, because we have all the streets looking the same from here towards the river. The buildings are also very similar, and to the left, to the right hand side, you have a pedestrian street that goes up behind Santa Justa's elevator. It's one of the famous elevators of Lisbon. Chiado is the area that we have behind the elevator. So that pedestrian street shows you a little bit of the 19th century atmosphere, because it was the area that was basically for the aristocrats. We had lots of shops there, tailor-made dresses were sewed there for the important ladies of Lisbon, and still nowadays it's a beautiful place to go for a walk. On the right hand side there are a few streets where you have the purple building. You have a pedestrian street which starts here and ends by the river. That's Augusta Street. It's the main pedestrian street of Lisbon, and it ends with a beautiful arch, which is the triumphal arch of Augusta Street. If you follow the street till the river, you'll find Commerce Square, which is a 30,000 square meter square, facing the river, where we used to have the royal palace. Unfortunately, it also disappeared with the earthquake of 1755. And the yellow buildings that you'll be seeing there are ministries of Lisbon still working there in the city center. This is the pedestrian street on the right. All the trees around this square are jacaranda trees. Oh my God.
¿Qué están haciendo ellas?
And in front of us we have a building which is a theater where you have the crane behind. It's Mary II Theater. It's a building from the 19th century. Take a look at the right. You get to see the castle up the hill from there.
No?
And also here on the right hand side there's a kind of a small square where you have a beautiful church from the 13th century which was massively destroyed in 1959 by a big fire. And entering this church is really impressive because you get to see the interior as on the day of that fire. We're gonna get back to restauradores because this is the official place where we can stop buses in Lisbon.
Tienes que coger la lateral. ¿Esta de aquí? Sí.
Even if you saw buses parked in Rocio, it's completely forbidden, and probably they're going to get a fee because this is the only place where we can stop, where the buses are a little bit more in front. And here you will have a little bit of free time before you go to the restaurant in Lisbon to have lunch. After lunch, you'll go to
Dit is koning Pedro IV. Een fan van mijn vader. Sorry, het is een bloemenstalletje. Dit is de Rua Augusto. Koning Jozef I, José.